The car was a 1991 Ford Ranger, dark green, with a cracked rear bumper and a Native American dream catcher hanging from the rearview mirror. It was parked in Lot C at the south rim of Grand Canyon National Park on a Tuesday morning in late September 1994. The engine was cold, the doors were unlocked. The dream catcher was still swaying slightly as if someone had just stepped out. His name was Daniel Reyes. He was 31 years old. He worked as a high school biology teacher in Flagstaff, Arizona, 47 miles away. He had no camping gear in the truck, no hiking boots, no water. He was wearing dress shoes. According to the only person who would later say they saw him, a woman named Vera Hutchins, a seasonal park employee who noticed him standing at the rim, looking down, for what she described as too long. That was the last confirmed sighting of Daniel Reyes. He had not told anyone he was going to the Grand Canyon. He had not called in sick to school. He had simply not shown up, which was so unlike him that his department head, Patricia Uele, spent an hour trying to reach him before contacting his emergency contact, his younger sister, Maria Reyes-Castillo. Maria told Patricia that Daniel had seemed fine the last time she'd spoken with him, which was 4 days earlier, on a Sunday evening. He had mentioned nothing unusual. He had talked about a movie he wanted to see. He had asked about her kids. The park rangers found the truck at 11:14 a.m. By 3 p.m., a search had been initiated. By the following morning, it had expanded to include helicopter overflights, ground teams along the Bright Angel and South Kaibab trails, and a river team in the canyon below. They found nothing, not a footprint, not a dropped item, not a single thread of his clothing on any ledge or trail. Daniel Reyes had vanished at one of the most visited, most surveilled, most geographically documented places in the United States, a place where thousands of tourists walk past the same viewpoints every day, and not one of them had seen him go over the edge. This is the story of what happened to Daniel Reyes, or rather, this is the story of what we know, what we don't know, and what the people who loved him have been living with for 30 years. Daniel Eduardo Reyes was born on March 4, 1963 in Tucson, Arizona, the oldest child of Ernesto and Dolores Reyes. His father worked at the University of Arizona as a ground supervisor. His mother ran a small alterations business from the front room of their house on South 6th Avenue. He had one sibling, Maria, 5 years younger. By all accounts, Daniel was a quiet, methodical child who became a quiet, methodical adult. His teachers remembered him as precise. His friends remembered him as loyal. His college roommate at Northern Arizona University, a man named Greg Alterman, remembered that Daniel kept a notebook, not a journal exactly, but a running log of observations, weather, animals he'd seen, small things that had caught his attention. He'd been doing it since high school, apparently. Greg still had one of the notebooks somewhere. He'd offered to show investigators in 1994. They'd declined. Daniel graduated in 1985 with a degree in biology. He completed his teaching certification the following year and took a position at Flagstaff High School, where he taught AP Biology and Environmental Science. His students consistently rated him among their favorite teachers. He coached junior varsity cross country for 3 years. He organized an annual overnight field trip to the Coconino National Forest that became something of an institution. He had been married once. Her name was Laura Bennett. They had married in 1989 when Daniel was 26 and divorced in 1992 when he was 29. The divorce was described by everyone who knew them as mutual and undramatic. There were no children. Laura had moved to Albuquerque by the time Daniel disappeared. She was contacted by investigators. She said she hadn't spoken to Daniel in over a year. She said this without apparent emotion. And then, according to the detective's notes, she paused for a long moment and said, "Is he okay?" When told that he was missing, she asked to sit down. After the divorce, Daniel lived alone in a rented house on West Cherry Avenue in Flagstaff, 3 bedrooms, 2 of which were essentially unused. He kept a vegetable garden in the backyard. He drove the dark green Ford Ranger. He went to the movies alone on Friday nights usually. He had a small but close circle of friends, Greg, who had stayed in Flagstaff, a woman named Caroline Stroud, who taught chemistry at the same school, and a man named Ray Nakai, who he'd met through the cross-country program and who became what Maria described as his closest friend in the years before the disappearance. Ray Nakai was Navajo, 34 years old, and worked as a ranger at Wupatki National Monument, about 40 miles north of Flagstaff. He and Daniel had been friends for approximately 3 years by the fall of 1994. They hiked together regularly. Ray had taught Daniel a fair amount about desert navigation and backcountry camping. According to Maria, Ray was the person Daniel called when something was genuinely wrong. And according to Ray, Daniel had called him 2 weeks before he disappeared. The call had come on a Thursday evening. Daniel had sounded, in Ray's words, like a man carrying something heavy. He hadn't explained what was wrong. He'd asked Ray if they could go hiking that weekend. Ray had a family obligation he couldn't cancel. He'd told Daniel they'd go the following weekend. Daniel had said, okay, fine, no problem. They'd talked for about 20 minutes about nothing in particular. The weather, a book Ray was reading, a student of Daniel's who had gotten into a biology program at ASU. Ray said Daniel had seemed, by the end of the call, lighter, less burdened, like talking had helped. That following weekend, Daniel was gone. Ray Nakai spent 3 days with the search teams in the canyon. He walked trails he'd never walked before, calling Daniel's name into the cold October air. He found nothing. He has never, in 30 years, fully accepted the possibility that Daniel went into the canyon. I've thought about this every year, Ray said in a phone interview conducted for this documentary. Every time I drive past the canyon, I've thought about what he would have done, and I don't think he jumped. I don't think he climbed down. He didn't have the gear. He didn't have water. Daniel knew the desert too well to go into a place like that without water. That was the one thing he always said, never go in without water. The canyon holds its silences like a locked room. The school year had started normally. According to Patricia Uele, Daniel had seemed fine in August and September. He'd submitted his lesson plans on time. He'd attended the faculty meeting. He'd been his usual self, quiet, organized, occasionally dry in a way that made people laugh without quite realizing they were going to. But Caroline Stroud remembered something different. He came to my classroom one afternoon, she said, maybe 2 weeks before. It was a Thursday, I think, late afternoon, after the kids had gone. And he stood in the doorway for a second, like he was deciding something. And then he came in and sat down and we talked. But the whole time, he had this look, like he was not quite present. Like part of him was somewhere else. She had asked him if everything was okay. He had said yes. She hadn't believed him, but she hadn't pushed. That was the last real conversation she had with him. The notebook was found in his house when investigators went through his belongings. It was a standard composition notebook, black and white, the same kind he'd apparently been keeping for years. The entries ran up to 3 days before his disappearance. The last entry read in full, "Crows on the wire again this morning. 7 of them. Cold coming." Investigators found nothing in the notebook that suggested distress, planning, or any specific concern. No references to any person or situation that seemed threatening. No goodbye, no explanation. The entry before the last one, dated 4 days earlier, mentioned a test he was writing for his AP class and a leaking faucet he needed to fix. The one before that mentioned a heron he'd seen at Lake Mary. Maria found the notebook entry about the crows meaningful, though she couldn't explain why. Daniel liked crows, she said. He always did. He used to say they were the smartest animals in Arizona, smarter than most people. She laughed when she said it, briefly, and then stopped. There was one other thing in the house that investigators noted. In the second unused bedroom, the one Daniel apparently used as a kind of office and storage room, there was a cardboard box on the desk that had not been there during Caroline's last visit to the house, approximately a month earlier. The box contained a series of files and documents. Most were mundane, old tax returns, insurance papers, teaching certificates. But at the bottom of the box, underneath everything else, there was a sealed envelope with no name or address on it. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. The photograph showed 2 men standing in front of what appeared to be a truck, not Daniel's Ranger, a different truck, older, a faded blue Chevy, in a desert landscape. One of the men was Daniel, younger, perhaps early to mid-20s, wearing a t-shirt and squinting against the sun. The other man was unidentified. He was approximately the same age, dark-haired, with a mustache, wearing a work shirt with rolled-up sleeves. Neither man was smiling. They were not looking at the camera. They appeared to be looking at something to the left of the frame, something the camera couldn't see. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that was not Daniel's, were the words, "You remember." Investigators never identified the second man in the photograph. The investigation into Daniel Reyes' disappearance was conducted jointly by the National Park Service, the Coconino County Sheriff's Office, and briefly, the FBI. The FBI's involvement was limited to a few weeks and was never fully explained to the family, though it was suggested to Maria at one point that there may have been a reason to believe Daniel had left the state voluntarily. Maria found this explanation unsatisfying. He left his car, she said. He left his wallet. He left his keys on the seat. What person leaves the state voluntarily and forgets their keys? The wallet was in the glove compartment. Inside, his driver's license, a Flagstaff library card, $43 in cash, and a photograph of Maria's 2 children taken the previous Christmas. The park rangers canvassed every employee and visitor they could locate from that morning. Vera Hutchins, the seasonal worker who'd seen him at the rim, gave a description consistent with Daniel's appearance, though she had not seen his face clearly, only his back and profile. She said he was wearing dark trousers and a light-colored button-down shirt. This matched what colleagues said he'd been wearing to school the previous days, suggesting he had not changed clothes before driving to the canyon. This detail, investigators later noted, was significant. Daniel had driven 47 miles to a national park in his work clothes, without water, without a plan, without telling anyone. 2 other visitors reported seeing a man matching Daniel's general description near the Mather Point Overlook, approximately half a mile from Lot C, between 9:30 and 10 a.m. Neither could give more detailed descriptions. Neither had paid close attention. He was just another person at the canyon, looking at the view. No one reported seeing him fall. No one reported seeing him on any trail below the rim. The river team found no body in the Colorado River. The canyon walls below Mather Point are nearly vertical for the first 300 feet. In 1994, there were no barriers, only the natural edge of the Kaibab Plateau limestone, crumbling in places, solid in others, photographed by thousands of visitors who had no idea what had happened there or hadn't happened, or, as the case may have been, had happened somewhere else entirely. The case went cold within 8 months. Coconino County listed Daniel Reyes as a missing person. No death certificate was filed for 7 years, at which point the legal presumption of death could be applied, and Maria, as next of kin, requested the determination so that the estate could be settled. She described the process as the worst thing she had ever done. Signing that paper, declaring your brother dead when you don't know, when there's nothing. It felt like lying. It felt like I was making it official myself, like I was the one deciding. She paused, but the lawyer said it had to be done. The unidentified man in the photograph became the central focus of investigative attention for several years. The family hired a private investigator in 1997, 3 years after the disappearance. His name was Tom Guidry, a retired Maricopa County detective. He spent 8 months on the case. Guidry traced the photograph's likely origin through the landscape in the background, a distinctive rock formation visible at the left edge of the image, identified by a geologist as consistent with the area around Winslow, Arizona, approximately 90 miles east of Flagstaff. He cross-referenced this with Daniel's personal history and found that Daniel had spent the summer of 1987, 2 years after graduation, 1 year into teaching, working as a field researcher for a small environmental consulting firm called Crestline Environmental Associates. The firm had been contracted to do land surveys in the Winslow area that summer. Guidry located several former employees of Crestline. Most remembered Daniel. One of them, a woman named Sandra Pelham, said she remembered Daniel having a close friendship that summer with a colleague named Marcus Van. She described Marcus Van as dark-haired, in his mid-20s at the time, with a mustache. She said Marcus and Daniel had spent a lot of time together that summer. She said something happened toward the end of the summer that she'd never fully understood. A falling out of some kind, she thought, though she hadn't witnessed it directly. Marcus had left the project 2 weeks early. Daniel had finished the summer alone and returned to Flagstaff. She did not know what had become of Marcus Van. Guidry spent 4 months trying to locate Marcus Van. He found a social security record, an address in Phoenix from 1989, and a single vehicle registration from 1991. The vehicle listed was a 1986 Chevy pickup, faded blue. Then, nothing. No further records, no death certificate, no current address, no known family. Marcus Van had, apparently, also disappeared. Guidry filed his final report in 1998. His conclusion was deliberately inconclusive. He could not determine whether Marcus Van's disappearance was connected to Daniel's, whether the photograph was a clue or simply a memento, or whether the inscription on the back, you remember, was a threat, a memory, or something else entirely. He recommended further investigation by law enforcement. Law enforcement did not follow up. There are 3 theories about what happened to Daniel Reyes that September morning. The first is the most statistically common outcome for unexplained canyon disappearances: that Daniel fell, that he climbed down from the rim, perhaps disoriented, perhaps in distress, perhaps simply curious, and that he fell in a location where his body was carried by the river or lodged in an inaccessible section of the canyon that has never been searched. The canyon is 277 miles long and in many places effectively unexplorable. Bodies have been lost in it before and not found for years, sometimes decades. This theory is supported by the fact that Daniel was at the rim, appeared distressed to at least one observer, and left no evidence of having departed the park by any means other than on foot. The second theory is that Daniel left the park voluntarily by an unknown means, that he arranged to be picked up, that he had planned a disappearance, that the car at the canyon was a deliberate misdirection. This theory is supported by almost nothing except the FBI's brief and never explained interest in the case, and by the sealed photograph, which suggests that Daniel had recently been thinking about something or someone from his past. Maria dismisses this theory entirely. Ray Nakai considers it, but finds it inconsistent with who Daniel was. He wouldn't leave Maria, Ray said. He wouldn't do that to his sister. The third theory is the one that no one in official positions will discuss, but that Maria and Ray have lived with for 30 years. It is not a theory so much as a question. What if someone else was there? What if the man in the photograph, Marcus Van, or whoever he was, had found Daniel first? This theory has no evidence to support it. There is no witness who saw 2 men together at the rim. There is no forensic evidence of struggle in the parking lot or at any trail access point. Marcus Van, whatever his fate, cannot be placed in Arizona in September 1994 by any record Guidry or anyone else has found. But the inscription on the back of the photograph sits in Maria's memory like a splinter. You remember. She has turned those 2 words over 10,000 times. A reminder, a threat, an acknowledgement of something shared, something that may have followed Daniel Reyes to the edge of one of the deepest places on Earth. In 2019, 25 years after Daniel's disappearance, Maria Reyes-Castillo received a phone call. The caller did not identify himself. He spoke for approximately 90 seconds before Maria, rattled, hung up, and called her son into the room. She remembered the call with extraordinary precision, the way you remember things that reach into you from a great distance. The man said he had known Daniel. He said they had worked together once, a long time ago. He said Daniel had been a good man. He said he was sorry. He said, and this is the part that Maria returned to again and again, he said, he didn't go over. I need you to know that. He didn't go over. Then he said he couldn't say anything else, and he hung up. Maria reported the call to the Coconino County Sheriff's Office immediately. They traced the number to a prepaid phone purchased at a gas station in Kingman, Arizona, 3 days before the call. The phone was never recovered. The purchaser was not identified. The gas station surveillance footage from the purchase date had already been overwritten. The call lasted 1 minute and 43 seconds. Maria listened to the recording she'd made on her answering machine. She had, by habit developed over years of hoping for news, gotten into the practice of recording her phone calls 17 times in the first week. Then she stopped listening to it because it was making her unable to sleep. He didn't go over, she repeated in our interview slowly, as if she were saying it for the first time, which means he's alive somewhere, or he was alive somewhere, or it means someone knows what happened and they're not saying. Any of those things. All of them. None of them makes it better. Ray Nakai heard about the call the following day. He sat with it for a long time. If he didn't go over, Ray said quietly, then he walked away from that rim. And he's been somewhere for 25 years, and he chose not to come back. Or he couldn't come back. And I don't know which of those is harder to think about. Maria Reyes-Castillo is 61 years old now. She lives in Tucson, in a house not far from the house she grew up in. Her children are adults. She keeps a photograph of Daniel on the windowsill in her kitchen. Not the formal school portrait that was used in the missing persons bulletin, but a casual snapshot from a family gathering in 1991, 3 years before he disappeared. He is laughing at something outside the frame. His head is slightly turned. He looks like someone who is entirely present in his life. She has not closed the case in her mind. She has filed periodic inquiries with the Coconino County Sheriff's Office and with the National Park Service. She has submitted Daniel's DNA profile to multiple missing persons databases. She has responded to 2 unverified sightings, one in Albuquerque in 2003, one in Los Angeles in 2011, both of which came to nothing. She has maintained a missing persons page for Daniel that still receives occasional messages from strangers who say they remember the case or think they may have information. None of the messages have led anywhere. Ray Nakai retired from the National Park Service in 2018. He lives in Window Rock, on the Navajo Nation, about 100 miles from where Daniel disappeared. He still hikes. He says he thinks about Daniel on almost every hike, which is not something he's found a way to stop doing, and which he no longer tries to stop. 30 years of thinking about someone, he said, you'd think it would fade. It doesn't. It just becomes part of the landscape, part of every landscape you look at. Caroline Stroud left Flagstaff High School in 2001 and eventually moved to Portland. She was reached by phone for this documentary. She said the disappearance had never fully left her. She still thought about that afternoon in her classroom doorway sometimes, the way Daniel had stood there, deciding whether to come in. She wondered still what he had been carrying, what it was he hadn't said. The Ford Ranger sat in the Coconino County impound lot for 2 years before being released to the estate. Maria sold it to a salvage dealer. She has sometimes regretted this, though she doesn't know what she would have done with it. The dream catcher that hung from the rearview mirror is in a box in her closet. She took it from the truck before it was sold. She has never thrown it away, and she has never hung it anywhere. It lives in the box, which lives in the dark. The Grand Canyon receives approximately 6 million visitors per year. On the morning of September 27, 1994, it was receiving several thousand. Parking lots were filling. Tour buses were rolling in from Las Vegas and Phoenix. Children were pressing against guardrails. Photographers were setting up tripods. A ranger was giving an interpretive talk about the geology of the Kaibab limestone at the Yavapai Geology Museum. Daniel Reyes was at the rim, looking down. What was he thinking about? What had brought him here, in his dress shoes, without water, without telling anyone? What was the weight that Ray Nakai had heard in his voice 2 weeks before? What had he put in a box on his desk, as if organizing something, as if preparing to leave or to arrive somewhere? The canyon does not answer questions. It absorbs them. It has been absorbing them for 2 billion years. The Colorado River at the bottom of the canyon runs cold and green in September. From the rim, it looks like a line drawn in pencil, thin, almost casual, impossibly far below. The distance between the rim and the river is more than a mile of vertical rock, more than a mile of time. The canyon is not, as people sometimes say, a hole in the earth. It is the earth cut open. Billions of years of geology made visible by patient water. Daniel Reyes knew this. He taught it every year in his AP Environmental Science class. The formation of the canyon, the layers of rock, the story of the Colorado, the relationship between water and time. He knew what the canyon was. He knew what it held. He had taken students there twice for field trips in 1991 and 1993. He had stood at this same rim before, in sunlight and in clouds, and looked down at the same river. On September 27, 1994, he stood there one last time, or for the last time that anyone can confirm. Then he was gone. There is a type of disappearance that investigators call a soft vanish. It leaves no body, no evidence of violence, no farewell. It simply leaves an absence, a shape where a person used to be, defined by everything around it. Daniel Reyes is a soft vanish. He is defined by his sister, who still looks for him, by his friend Ray, who carries him on every hike, by his former students, some of whom have written to Maria over the years to say what he meant to them, by a composition notebook full of careful observations, by a sealed envelope, by 2 words written in someone else's handwriting on the back of an old photograph. You remember, by a phone call in 2019 from a man who said he didn't go over. Maria Reyes-Castillo has a theory about the phone call that she offered at the very end of our conversation, quietly, almost as an aside. I think whoever called me, she said, they knew, they'd known for a long time. Maybe they were there, maybe they saw something, and after 25 years, they couldn't carry it anymore, and they had to put some of it down somewhere, and they chose me, which means they knew who I was, which means they'd been watching the page, or the news, or something. For 25 years, they'd been watching. She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know if Daniel is alive," she said. "I've stopped knowing. I used to know, for years. I was certain he was alive, and then I was certain he was gone, and now I'm just in it, in the not knowing. It's where I live now." Outside the canyon, the late autumn light was doing what it always does in northern Arizona, turning the sandstone copper and the shadows long, and the sky a shade of blue that has no name in any language she knows of. "He loved this light," she said. "He always said, 'This is why you stay in Arizona, the light in October, the way it looks like the whole world is on fire.'" She looked out the window for a moment. "I hope he can see it," she said. "Wherever he is, I hope he can still see the light."
30 years later, the questions remain. What do you think happened to Daniel Reyes? Was it a tragic accident, a deliberate disappearance, or something far more mysterious? Let us know your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next mystery. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most haunting mysteries are the ones that never find an answer.